Hi everybody, Creative Katie, Karen Burchill here. Thank you for watching my video. Today we are doing a napkin art journal and we're going to cover some of the basics. So if you're a beginner or you need a refresher, grab a cup of coffee and join me while we create. This is one of my 5 for fall, where I'm using 5 different napkins, making 5 different art journaling mixed media projects. All the napkins come from NINNYSNAPKINS.com. There's a link in the description box. This one is called Reading Time, and you get 4 identical images, and I am only going to use 1. And I've rough cut them out just so I can try them on the different substrates and see if they fit. So when you are deciding on substrates, you can grab the substrate, rough cut the napkin like I did, and then you can see this is a 6x6 card. There's enough room to put the sentiment, so that would work for a 6x6. Here's a 7x10 art journal page. If I put it in the corner, either corner, I still have lots of room to develop an interesting background and put a sentiment. This one's a 9x12. I'm thinking while it might work, there's a little bit too much real estate here. The image gets dwarfed. So size matters. So try them out and pick what works best. Now right now I've decided to use my 7x10. This is Canson mixed media paper. I've taken it off the coil so I get to work flat. And I'm going to tape off the coiled section, the top section, so I don't get paint and gunk in that. And that's going to give me a clean straight line across the top. I'm giving this a coat of gesso. This is what I do pretty much for every single page. I give it a coat of gesso, prepare the page. It gives the page a little bit more substance, and it allows me to do different techniques. Now when I rough cut it, I leave the excess plies on, and when I get ready to decoupage it on, I just wet my fingers and pull off the layers. Now I want to water cut any of that excess napkin out. Now this one, it's pretty much white, so I could leave it and it would go fairly translucent, but I like that deckled kind of torn edge that you get when you water cut it. I'm putting very little water on my liner brush and I'm just working my way around, letting the water soak in and do the cutting for me. If you put too much water and it goes all over the napkin, just get the heat tool out, dry it up. When it's dry, go back and redo it. Don't try to pull the napkin. You'll probably end up ripping part of it that you don't want. This I've kept pretty much real time. And you can see it just takes a little bit of time, but it's not hard. And just if it's not working, keep practicing. Use a napkin that you don't particularly like and practice on it. Once you build the skill, you will love doing this. And there we have it. So I went and I found some sayings. Books are my love language. A good book has no ending. Happiness is a cup of coffee and a good book. And I printed off several on a page. I wasn't sure which one I was going to use. I know I have 3 more images of the same. So what I don't use today, I'll use on another one. I can take this one and put it on a card. I would also love to make this again on an 8x10, either canvas or canvas board, that I can display on an easel or on the wall in my coffee bar. I've chosen happiness is a cup of coffee and a good book as my sentiment. And you'll notice that I'm not working landscape anymore. I've gone the other way. I'm bubble cutting around the script, getting rid of a lot of that excess white. Not exactly perfect, but I like to get rid of that excess white. I think that distracts from the finished. If you don't mind that look, then you don't have to. You can skip this step. As always, I give you the basics. You take whatever works for you, tweak it, adjust it, use what you have. And then I'm just going to leave these in rectangles, but I am getting rid of a lot of the white. Now to prepare the background, I'm using this Stampers Anonymous. It's called Reflections, and this is text stamp. Usually I use a script stamp, but with this one, because books are usually not script, I want it text, so this is another good basic stamp. And I'm just putting this randomly on the page. I'm not looking for a clear stamp or perfect stamping at all. This is just interest in the background. This stencil is called Distressed Knit, and I am going to put some thick gesso through the stencil. This is going to add very subtle patterning. It's going to knock back some of the text, and it's also going to add a little bit of texture to the background. How much shows in the end is up to you and what you do with when you start colorizing the page. Not a lot shows on the picture, the texture, but in real life it's very definitely there, and it is adding to the whole. So sometimes you can add something and the purpose of it is to be there subtly, not in your face. When I add the gesso, this is going to take time to dry. You can use the heat tool to dry it or just give it time. Now I'm ready to colorize, and what I'm using is unbleached titanium, which is a good neutral base. And since I've discovered it, I use it a lot. Then I'm adding white gesso to it. So some areas are darker and you're getting that mottled look. I prefer getting that mottled look with different shades of the same color. I think that adds interest to the background in a very, very easy way. I prefer not. And if you get too dark, you can grab a baby wipe and wipe it back. And because you gessoed it all first, that allows you to do that. If it was on raw paper, you'd have a little harder time. So you can see some of that variation that I have in here. Then I grab this Distress Knit stencil, and I'm stenciling with full-on unbleached titanium. And again, it's giving a little bit of a pattern. This you really don't see later because of what I did afterwards. So I'm lining up, figuring out exactly where I want things to be, exploring my options. It's not over till it's over. Now there's some text right underneath where I'm going to glue the napkin. And if I glued the napkin there, because napkins go translucent, that was going to show through. So I'm just taking a little white gesso and covering up the text that I don't want to come through my napkin, my focal image. And then I'm making sure that that's dry before I glue anything down. So now those book pages aren't going to show that text coming through. Thank you to those of you who are subscribers. If you're not a subscriber, please hit the subscribe button and click on the bell and select the option to be notified of upcoming videos. Love to have you join the creation ship. I'm just adding a little bit more text. This one is a little bit brighter now than what was before. So again, we have the same text stamp, but there's kind of two tones. I want to add some burnt sienna, some yellow oxide, and maybe some green or brown to the background. Those are colors that are in the focal image. So I'm using the same color scheme. Then I went to this stamped sentiment that came from the Crafter's Workshop, and sometimes they have these little bits, these little hearts or diamonds or something that make perfect little additions. So I thought, you know, I love a good book, a cup of coffee, so I'm stamping this with burnt sienna, kind of all over, and I'm trying to avoid that center place because, again, I don't want this to shine through my focal image. So I added the text stamp. Now we're stamping with the hearts. That could be some other shape. Circles, dots would work well here. Good basics. Now I'm grabbing some of the green. This is Hooker's green, I believe. And I'm going to use the smaller hearts from that same stamp set. Often when I have these little elements, these little stamps in a bigger stamp set, I might take them out and keep them in a separate tin by themselves, because then those are the ones that I can use on the different pages. And I don't have to remember which stamp set was this from. So I've added the green, and right now I'm thinking I'm done. I'm thinking I've got a bunch of it, so I'm edging with the burnt sienna. That kind of frames the page. And then I'm going to use my angle brush and shade around there. And that's going to give a more diffused look to the edging. I'm trying to decide right now, am I done with the background? Am I happy with it? Is there enough interest in there? Is it too plain? And I decide I need a little bit of color. So I am going to attempt to do drippage. I put some burnt sienna on there. I spray it. I let it drip. And I'm targeting the areas where that thick gesso went with the stenciling. So it gets caught in the nooks and cranny, and then you can wipe off some of it with your baby wipe as you go. I keep trying this technique. It never quite, in my mind, works for me, but you know what? Keep trying. But I'm adding a little bit of color to the background. I like the addition of color. It just looked a little too flat for me, too much just unbleached titanium. It needed something. But I don't want to do too much. My focal image has a lot of detail in it. There's books, there's leaves, there's flowers, there's the coffee cup. And I don't want that to compete too much with everything that's going on in the background. So this is what they call the dance. You're adding something, you're taking away. I can put more gesso on. And then I decided I needed some contrast, so I grabbed black, and this stencil is called Hole Punch. And it's just the perfect size, and I'm adding a little bit of the black, and I'm liking how that's working with the black that's in that book, in the glasses, on the coffee cup, and it will also go well with the sentiment that's black. I may have gotten a little carried away with this, but It just added, it made it a little more interesting. I like the unpredictability of this stencil. I think I'm going to get a lot of use out of it. And then I'm edging with black. And you'll see me taking out the shading brush and going around that again as well. I've avoided putting any of the black stenciling in the middle because, again, that's where I'm putting my focal image. And now I am ready to glue down my focal image with, I use Fluid Matte Medium. This is the Liquitex brand. You can use Mod Podge if that's what you prefer. Stick to the matte finish because that allows you to not have to cover the whole page. You won't have the little shiny bits showing through. I put it under and then I put it on top. And I'm using a generous portion, keeping the brush fairly wet. That helps prevent you from inadvertently ripping or tearing that napkin when it's wet. Now I'm gluing the sentiment down. And I'm finding it distracting, that black stenciling. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab some white gesso and some unbleached titanium, knock that back so that my sentiment stands out. I'm just giving it a good base just to be glued on. Happiness is a cup of coffee and a good book. Now I grab some of those heart stamps and I'm adding some yellow, some of the yellow oxide on there, just another added detail. I just thought I needed some of that yellow in the background. Now I grabbed my General's charcoal. This is the medium one, and I'm outlining to make the focal image stand out. So this is kind of giving a little bit of the shading, a little bit of outlining, and I'm going on top of the napkin. Now, you want to make sure that the napkin is 100% dry because otherwise you're going to rip the napkin when you start with your pencil. And as I go, you can see that it's just bringing that out, making the focal image stand out a little bit more out of that background. It's very sketchy, very loose. I'm smudging a little bit. Just adds to that whole feel. Are you ready for fall? Be sure to come back and check out the other 4 mixed media art journaling projects that I have in store for you. I'm splattering with gold. And there we have it. One fall themed project. I'm liking how it looks. So grab your napkin, grab a couple stencils, a text stamp, and go get creative.